The Trumpet of the Swan, Chapter 3. A Visitor. One day, almost a week later, the swan slipped quietly into her nest and laid an egg. Each day she tried to lay one egg in the nest. Sometimes she succeeded, sometimes she didn't. There were now 3 eggs, and she was ready to lay the 4th egg. As she sat there with her husband, the cob, walking around back and forth, she had a strange feeling that she was being watched. It made her uneasy. Birds don't like to be stared at, and they particularly don't like to be stared at when they're sitting on their nest. So the swan twisted and turned and looked around everywhere, and she gazed about. Look what's going on here. There's the swans sitting on their nest. We can see them right over here. And what's over here? What's his name again? What's his name? Do we remember? They looked at the point of land that jutted out into the pond, and with her sharp eyes, she searched the nearby shore for signs of an intruder. What she finally saw gave her the surprise of her life. There, seated on the log, on the point of land, was a small boy. He was being very quiet. "Do you see what I see?" the swan said to her husband. "No, what?" "Over there on a log. It's a boy." "Now what are we going to do?" "How did the boy get here?" whispered the cob. "We're deep in the woods of Canada. There's no humans around for miles." "That's what I thought too," she said. "But if that isn't a boy over there on a log, my name isn't Sinus Buttnicketer." "What?" "Buttnicketer." The cob was furious. "I didn't fly all the way north into Canada to get involved with a boy," he said. "We came here to enjoy this idyllic spot, this remote little hideaway, so we could enjoy some well-deserved privacy." See them there? They're sitting there all quiet together. And look way over here. Look at the little picture. There's the boy sitting there. "Well," said his wife, "I'm sorry to see the boy too, but I must say he's behaving himself. He sees us, but he's not throwing stones, and he's not throwing sticks, and he's not messing around. He's simply watching." "I don't wish to be watched," complained the cob. "I didn't travel all this immense distance into the heart of Canada to be watched. Furthermore, I don't want you to be watched except by me. You're laying an egg. That is, I hope you are. You're entitled to your privacy. It has been my experience that all boys throw sticks and stones. It's their nature. I'm going over and strike that boy with my powerful wing, and he'll think he was been hit by a baseball bat. I'll knock him out cold." "Now, just a minute," said the swan. "There's no use starting a fight. The boy isn't bothering us at the moment, and he's not bothering you either." "But how did he get here?" said the cob, who was no longer talking in a whisper, but was beginning to shout. "How did he get here? Boys can't fly, and there's no roads in this part of Canada. We're 50 miles from the nearest highway." "Maybe he's lost," said the mama swan. "Maybe he's starving to death. Maybe he wants to rob the nest and eat the eggs. But I doubt it. He doesn't look hungry. Anyway, I've started this nest, and I have 3 beautiful eggs, and the boy's behaving himself at the moment. I think I'll go right ahead and try for a 4th egg." "Good luck, my love," said the cob. "I shall be here at your side to defend you if anything happens. Lay the egg." For the next hour, the cob paddled slowly around the tiny little island, keeping watch. His wife remained quiet on the nest. And the boy, Sam, remember the boy's name, Sam? He sat on his log, hardly moving a muscle. He was spellbound at the sight of the swans. They were the biggest water birds he had ever seen. He had heard their trumpeting and searched the woods and swamps until he found the pond and located the nest. Sam knew enough about birds to know that these were trumpeter swans. Sam always felt happy when he was in a wild place among wild creatures. Sitting on his log watching the swans, he had the same good feeling some people had when they're sitting in church. After he had watched for about an hour, Sam got up, and he walked slowly and quietly away, putting one foot straight ahead of the other like an Indian, hardly making a sound. The swans watched him go, and when the mommy left the nest, she turned and looked back. There, lying safely in the soft feathers at the bottom of the eggs of the nest, was the fourth egg. And the cob waddled out onto the island and looked in the nest. A masterpiece, he said. An egg of supreme beauty and perfect proportions. I would say that egg is almost 5 inches in length. His wife was pleased. Soon she laid the fifth, and when she laid 5 eggs, she felt satisfied. She gazed at them proudly. Then she settled herself on top of the nest to keep the eggs warm. Carefully, she reached down with her bill and poked each egg until it was just in the right spot to receive the heat from her body. The cob cruised around close by to keep her company and to protect her from enemies. He knew that a fox prowled somewhere in the woods, and he heard them barking on nights when the hunting was good. Days had passed, and still the swan sat quietly on the 5 eggs. Nights had passed. She sat and sat, giving the warmth of her body to the eggs. No one disturbed her. The boy was gone. Perhaps he'd never come back. Inside of each egg was something happening that she couldn't see. A little swan was taking shape. As the weeks went by and the days grew longer and the nights grew shorter, when a rainy day came, the swan just sat still and let it rain. "My dear," said her husband, the cob, after one afternoon, "do you ever find your duties tiring? Don't you get tired of sitting in one place and in one position, covering the eggs with nothing else to do, no escapes or running around? Don't you ever suffer from being bored?" "No," said the wife, "not really." "Isn't it uncomfortable to sit on the eggs?" said the cob. "Yes, it is," said the wife, "but I can put up with a certain amount of discomfort for the sake of bringing young swans into the world." "Do you know how many more days you must sit?" the cob asked. "Haven't any idea," she said, "but I noticed that the ducks at the other end of the pond have hatched their young ones, and I noticed the red-winged blackbirds have hatched theirs, and the other evening I saw a striped skunk hunting along the shore, and she had 4 little skunks with her. So I think we must be getting near the end of time. With any luck, we'll be able to soon see our children, our beautiful little cygnets." Remember, that's the name of the little swans, cygnets. "Don't you ever feel the pangs of hunger or suffer the tortures of thirst?" asked the cob. "Yes, I do," said the mommy. "As a matter of fact, I could use a drink right now." Pop-Pop ain't going there. The afternoon was warm and the sun was bright. The swan decided she could safely leave her eggs for a few minutes. She stood up. First, she pushed some loose feathers around the nest, trying to hide them from view and giving them a warm covering when she was gone. And then she stepped off the nest into the water and swam a bit. She took a couple of quick drinks. Then she glided over to a shallow place and stuck her long neck underwater and pulled up some tender green shoots from the bottom. Next, she took a bath by tossing water all over herself. Then she waddled out onto the grassy bank and stood there, pushing at her feathers with her bill. The swan felt good. She had no idea that an enemy was near. She failed to notice the red fox as he watched her from his hiding place behind a clump of bushes. The fox had been attracted to the pond by the sound of splashing water. He'd hoped he would find a goose. Now he sniffed the air and he smelled a swan. Her back was turned, so he began creeping slowly toward her. She would be too big for him to carry, but he decided he would jump on her anyway. And the cob, the husband, was still floating out on the pond. He saw the fox first. "Look out," he yelled. "Look out for the fox. He's creeping toward you." His eyes were bright, his tail bushy straight out, and he was looking for a swan to eat. "You are in grave danger. We must act immediately." While the cob was making this elegant speech of warning, something happened that surprised everybody. Just as the fox was about to jump on the swan's neck, a stick came flying through the air, and it struck the fox right on the nose, and he turned and ran away. The two swans looked at each other, and they didn't know what happened. Then they saw movement in the bushes. Out stepped Sam Beaver, the little boy who had visited them a month ago. Sam was smiling. In his hand he held another stick, in case the fox should return, but the fox was in no mood to return. He had a very sore nose, and he lost his appetite. Look at that. See him rubbing his nose there? He lost his appetite. "Hello," said Sam in a low voice. "Caw-caw, caw-caw," replied the cob. "Caw-caw," said his wife. The pond rang with trumpet sounds, the sounds of triumph over the fox, the sounds of victory and gladness. Sam was thrilled at the noise of the swans, which some people say is like the sound of a French horn. He walked slowly around the shore to the little point of land near the island and sat down on his log. The swans now realized beyond any doubt that the boy was their friend. He had saved their life. He'd been in the right place at the right time with the right ammunition. The swans felt grateful. The cob swam over towards Sam, climbed out of the pond, and stood close to the boy, looking at him in a friendly way and arching his neck gracefully. Once he ran his neck far out cautiously and almost touched the boy. Sam never moved a muscle. His heart thumped from excitement and joy. And the mommy paddled back to her nest and returned to her job of warming the eggs. She felt lucky to be alive. That night, before Sam crawled into his bunk at the camp, he got out his notebook and he found his pencil, and this is what he wrote. "I don't know of anything in the entire world more wonderful to look at than a nest with eggs in it. An egg, because it contains life, is the most perfect thing there is. It is beautiful and mysterious. An egg is a far finer thing than a tennis ball or a cake of soap. A tennis ball will always just be a tennis ball, and a cake of soap will always just be a cake of soap, until it gets so small nobody wants it and they throw it away. But an egg will someday be a living creature. A swan's egg will open, and out will come a little swan. A nest is almost as wonderful and mysterious as an egg. How does a bird know how to make a nest? How does anybody teach her?" Sam closed his notebook, said good night to his father, blew out his lantern, and climbed into his bunk. He lay there wondering how a bird knows how to build a nest. Pretty soon his eyes were closed and he was asleep. That's the end of that chapter.